Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Soberful Podcast. I'm Veronica.
And I'm Chip.
So sometimes we start the podcast before we start the podcast. And we're like, what should we talk about? And then we're like, oh, yeah. And then we're like, oh, no, we must be recording. And we were just doing that because today we're going to be talking about anger and all the way it manifests in sobriety. So anger in sobriety is the topic today.
Yeah.
You were just saying a bunch of interesting things, but I want to sort of start with this because I did a few posts about this and it got a huge response on social media about the symptoms of being a dry drunk. And okay, I know some people don't like that term and I'm just using it because it's a well-known phrase in the recovery circles and it's useful description. A dry drunk is somebody who has stopped drinking but can't emotionally self-regulate themselves because before they were using alcohol and now they don't have that. And they're not going to drink. They don't want to drink, but they can't emotionally self-regulate. So they can use other substances and other behaviors. But one of the two big things you'll see is a lot of anger and a lot of control, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I've seen that a lot of that. I've seen people who have, they've got sober, but they're just not engaged in the process of kind of changing. The only change they've made is they've put the alcohol down.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a lot of people who actually do that quite frequently. And they put the alcohol down. They don't make any personal changes at all. They got no sort of reflection, no insight, no sort of self-regulation, as you said. And I think they just get so cross with themselves and everybody else that other people seem to be able to do it. They can't. And I've really met them as angry people. I've got people also. To me, this is interesting because it's one of the great unspoken things about sobriety is that you can have all sorts of feelings in sobriety, but the one thing you're not allowed to have is anger. And I think there are some things that I have been angry about. People who've mistreated me, I feel anger towards, which I've had to resolve in therapy. And I think that's a very long way of trying to explain what dry drunk stuff is, because if all I'd done is put down the drugs, I would have been left as someone who felt damaged, who had done a lot of damage, who had been very damaged by childhood stuff and noisy dogs and things like that.
Sorry, Cadbury.
And I think the joy of my sobriety has come from kind of learning how to live in the world without being angry and without being hurt and without being a menace. I don't know. I just think that it's something that I know that when I was drinking and using, I behaved in a way that frightened people. Anger was just below the surface all the time. I mean, to the point where there was a lot of anger directed at myself. And I just think it's so complicated for people to make that change. They think that when they just put down the alcohol, everything's going to change. And we often talk about a lot of other feelings that come back when we give up drinking. We talk about sadness that comes back. We talk about sort of the difficulties that people have had with their childhood and the feelings that they come around that come back. We have the fact that people have got to sort of face the reality of a lot of emotions, but we don't hear a lot about, well, what happens if your anger comes back? I mean, were you an angry? Did you use alcohol? I mean, how many people do we know who are quite angry drunks? You know, there are a lot of people who use alcohol to be able to voice what's going on in there. They get drunk and they start mouthing
to let their
off.
Emotions out because they don't know how to let, and then it comes out all sideways and horrible when we do that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do that. And I think then when they put the alcohol down, if you don't address those things, whether it's a loving thing or an angry, if you don't address it, you're stuck with it. And that's when I think it starts to, sobriety doesn't become, well, it isn't enjoyable for somebody like that because they've not done any of the work that needs to be done. And I want to sort of, what I want to say is that in a way, this is a really important kind of benchmark, because the difference between those people who've just stopped drinking and those people who stop drinking and engage in a program of self-reflection and trying to learn from their past the difference between those two people is enormous. The
Mm.
people who engage in a program of self-reflection, self-awareness, maybe a little bit of remorse and all those things, those people will not necessarily manifest a lot of anger. People who just put down the alcohol and are left with all those feelings of that, some of it might be genuine hurt, some of it might be they're angry at their financial failures or the things that they've lost while they've been drinking, dealing with it. They're trying to, often I think they're quite lonely people. They kind of are trying to do it all on their own without the support of anybody else. And I think that's why it doesn't work for people, because if you're a dry drunk, you're not asking people for help. You're probably pushing help away. You're angry at anybody who comes anywhere near you. I mean, what's the first lesson you learn when you're sort of told about interventions and things? Is that, when you tell somebody you think they've got an alcohol problem, their response is always anger. No, I haven't. How dare you tell me that? How dare you? Look at this, look at that, look at this. I just think it's something that needs to be talked about a lot more, because I think people do have and carry a lot of anger about themselves and others that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah, and we don't know, nobody really knows how to deal with anger because it's so scary, and male anger and female anger is very, very different. And anger there's lots of roots to it, right? Like you see, like somebody, just like you said, look, I think you're drinking too much, and somebody gets really angry, right? Underneath that, there's so much. So I always like the phrase, anger is just fear announced.
Okay. Yeah.
And that always made that really kind of was insightful for me. I really began to see that anger is more often than not a manifestation of fear, right? So with your example, if I say, look, I really think you're drinking too much, you're going to feel fear. Like, oh my, like, yeah. But probably that, oh my God, people aren't noticing, are they? Like, like if people notice, I could lose my job, right? Or more, it would be like, oh my God, no, I'm not, I'm fine. What are you talking about? I'm fine, right? Like, don't take this away from me. I'm not ready to give this up. So what's underneath the anger is fear. And I think people intuitively know that. Also, anger is such great defense as well, right? When people are angry, like
they back away.
Yeah.
The others back away.
Yeah. Like, and especially when there is threat to it, and there is like, it's just so scary. It's such a great deflection. I mean, it really works because nobody wants to. It's hard to have other people angry with you, right? It's really hard to sit with that and have like, if I angered you, like you were really angry with me, that's a really uncomfortable place for me to be in.
Sure. Yeah, it is. But it's, as you were saying that, it was interesting how people often say, what kind of drunk are you? And you go, well, what do you mean? Well, are you a sort of maudlin, morose drunk? Are you happy-go-lucky drunk? Or are you an angry drunk?
Yeah. Angry drunks. Oh, God.
Angry drunks.
They're the worst.
That includes probably many of us have been angry drunks, people who have found their voice through alcohol and have carrying a lot of hurt and carrying a lot of shame about things and don't have the resources to sort of self-reflect. So they just get angry at everybody, and maybe especially people who try and help them. Why are you trying to help me now? Yes, nobody's helped me in the past. What makes you so special? That's the sort of phrases I get thrown at me occasionally. Why do you think you should be? How come you know what to do? I don't, and all that sort of thing. I'm trying to think. I don't think I'm an angry person. I think of all the kind of emotional traits that there are several that I don't think I have been angry. I can remember the kind of occasions when I've been angry. I'm not counting the times when I was drunk and angry. They were multitudes of those. When I was using, all my behavior was very angry. My criminal behavior was very angry. It was the way I used my drugs was, I think, very angry. There's something quite angry about stubbing yourself 3 times a day. But I think when I got into recovery and sobriety, I don't think I've really got out and out 3 times. I think I can think of when I've got out and out really angry and sort of started shouting. But it's something I think people don't like to talk about. It's a word that people shy away from, quite rightly, because that's what we do when people get angry around us. I mean, you've only got to go to if you go to, people do go to self-help meetings, if there's an angry person in that room, everybody keeps very quiet. Everybody kind of tiptoes around them. They don't want to say anything to upset them, and they can kind of dominate proceedings. And I've known that a few times in the time I've been around. Somebody will come along who's just spitting blood at everything, and it just makes everybody shut down, because that's what happens in families when you get an angry person. That's the other element of looking at anger, is how has the anger of other people affected you today? Were your parents angry people? Were your siblings angry people? Mine weren't. Mine were very emotionally apathetic. The idea of anger in my family was just not a feature. It just didn't feature at all.
That's so interesting, because that's interesting. So they were just, because my family were like that as well, just very, like, they had this emotional range of like about 3 inches, right? Like they were just, oh, that's pleasant, and oh, how upsetting, right?
Yeah.
But my mother would get angry. Like, I had those memories of, like, if I accidentally broke a dish, that kind of, because she would hit the roof. And I remember having the same response when my kids were little, and seeing my son's response and kind of catching myself and going, oh, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I still, like, my youngest son, like, just will go off into the kitchen and do all kinds of things, and you're kind of like, oh my God. And and he'll make a mess. And and I have really worked hard on, like, I feel it in me. Like, I'll walk in and be like, like, there's water there's batter splattered up, right? Like, my initial response is I want to get angry, and I don't want to with him. So I take a breath, and I'm like, no problem. We're just going to clean up our mess. And I focus on that. It's all right. Everyone makes a mess but it's not, I would say it's not like, I have to work at that.
Yeah.
Like, that was role model from my mother. And my instant response is automatically anger. And I don't want my children to experience that. So I have to really be conscious of that, because it really affected me. Like, I just knew if I did, like, and it was such an automatic response in my mother that she still has, that she had zero awareness of it. And what she would be angry about would be something that was just really didn't matter and was really insignificant. It was really disproportionate. It was really disproportionate. And I worked really hard on not having that with my own children, and just being like, okay, we made a mess, no worries, let's clean up.
Yeah, which is because I deal with a lot of people who have come from where there've been a lot of shouting going on between damaged, dysfunctional families, where there's been divorce and separation, and children.
Having an angry parent.
Yeah. I mean, and how many clients have I got who have said to me, I used to sit in bed listening to them shouting, or I'd be at the top of the stairs listening to them shouting, or I'd be trying to step in between, listen to them shouting. And I think if we maybe there's something about coming from angry background that certainly damages us. It certainly damages us, because, these two people who are at each other all the time are obviously not paying proper attention to the children. They're kind of ignoring the children. They're just too engrossed in their own hatred of the situation that they're in, can't get out of it. So I think, I kind of wish there had been a bit more expressions of emotion in my family, I suppose, but it really was, as you said, a very, very narrow band of, my mother was, I think, very angry, but she had a way of just that tone of voice, criticism that was constantly negative. Why are you doing that? Stop showing off. Stop doing this. Stop doing that. Stop doing this. It was always stop doing something. Or why are you doing that? Why aren't you doing something? But angry. But I think you notice the people who, when you come into recovery and you kind of start to meet other people who are in recovery and sobriety, I don't come across angry people that often. But when I do think, what's going on with you? You're very angry. And often it's because all they've done is put down the drink. They're not dealing with anything. Because I think most people come into sobriety slightly damaged. I know that's quite a sweeping generalization, but I do think most people come into sobriety slightly damaged, and some people find that harder to admit than others. But I would almost go to my grave saying that most people come into sobriety slightly damaged. And I think if you don't that damage has been caused by somebody. It might have been caused by people, it might have been caused by institutions, it might have been caused by family, it might have been caused by schools. Certainly, I know I had a lot of anger towards my boarding schools and the way they treated us and the way they demeaned you.
But that is rational
anger, yes.
Justified anger, and an appropriate emotional response to the event. And Chip went to a boarding school where there was a lot of abuse, sexual and all sorts to him and other boys. So that is an approach, like, you should be. I'd be worried if you weren't angry.
Yeah.
Now, you don't want to stay in anger for the rest of your life about that, right? That's the point, right? At some point in that process, you need to be angry, but you absolutely do not want to stay stuck in that anger, because that would eat you.
Yes, I completely agree. I think, and I'm glad you picked me up on that, because I think there is such a difference between, yes, I am justifiably angry at the way that I was treated as a child. No question about it. It was abusive and damaging and not at all encouraging or loving. So yes, I have every right to be angry about that. But if I spend all my life living in that anger, I'm not going to move forward. I've got a client at the moment who is just living in anger about the past, and it's not going to prove anything. It's not going to, you've got to sort of justifiably angry, maybe find a way of dealing with that. Therapy is usually a very good way of doing that. Start looking at, because in a way that person wins. Say I'm angry at my abusers, which I, as you quite rightly say, I'm entitled to be angry at them. If I remain angry with them all my life, they've won.
Yes.
They've won.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I have no desire for them to win at all, because if I've got to be able to put that anger, dealt with it in a certain way, in my way, it wasn't possible to deal with them because they were both dead. So I've just got to make sure that I don't allow that to keep on. There's something about perpetual anger that is very destructive and is very tiring. And I think you have to learn how to kind of draw a line, not forget it, but draw a line and go, okay, yes, I'm angry about that, but how is this anger serving me now? Is this anger, is it getting to them? Is it getting to the person who harmed? No, it's not. I'm shouting at everybody around me. I'm shouting at my family. I'm slamming doors and I'm doing that. People who, I think most people, if they're demonstrably angry, it's because they haven't even, if you were to sit down with them and say, why are you angry? They'd probably, and they'd pick on something really insignificant, but actually probably the anger is something much greater, much more important than somebody cut them up in the traffic or something. But something about being an angry person, as you said earlier on.
You said it, living in anger. It's the living in, and then there's an addictive quality to it. So there's something about certain people who, like, they'll just move on to the next thing to be angry about, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, and sometimes it starts with something justified, but that's like their primary default is to see the world through, like, everything makes them angry. So when we talk about getting to the roots of that, that's a very unhappy person. That's someone who's very, very unhappy.
Yeah.
Because when you're angry, nothing is right and nothing is. So we'll never, like, anger is it's an appropriate emotion to certain events. Like, it's appropriate, it's motivating.
Yep.
We need to, if we didn't ever feel angry, there is something wrong with us, because there are things that happen to us and to other people and to the world that should make you angry. But it's then what you do with that anger and how you express it that is kind of the follow-on and the root of it. There's an expression like rageaholics.
Yeah. I've come across a couple of them. Definitely people who they just thrive on being angry, and they'll find anything to be angry about. And they are very difficult people to get close to. They give off this they just give off this aura. Don't come anywhere near me. Don't come anywhere near me. They've got this sort of force field around them that you can't penetrate. And I find anger quite scary, I have to say. My experience of being around angry people when I was, that wasn't good fun. But also I don't know how to handle it. I think that's the I don't think anyone does.
We're highly skilled mental health professionals. I don't know. And it depends who it is, right?
Yeah.
So if it was a big guy I would instinctively like want to remove myself or calm that. Like that's the only way I would deal with that. If
Yeah.
it's a small woman, I wouldn't feel like there was a threat of physical harm there. So to be honest, anger actually doesn't scare me. I can deal with most people's anger unless it's like there's a sort of hint of physical threat.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I've had situations, but because I just see anger different, I see it as like you're really unhappy
Yes.
or you're really frightened. I see that. So, but I don't think most people,
I don't think most
nobody
people do
wants to
see
deal
that.
with
Yeah.
it.
No.
Yeah. I mean, it's not something I want to deal with, but that's what's going, that's what I respond to is you're really frightened or you're really unhappy. Unless I feel like they make me feel scared. And if that's the case, then I don't want to deal with it. I just want to get out of that situation as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of street photography, and just once every 5 years or so, somebody will get really angry. You're actually allowed to take photographs of people in public places. It's not against the law, but they will. I had one the other day, actually, not that long ago. He chased me down. You're not allowed to take photographs of me. That's in a breach of my privacy. And he was absolutely up for a fight. And I just walked away. But I mean, it just took so little to trigger him to being angry. And I think that's the difference between people who have kind of, looked at their shit or something, but they've looked at what makes them tick. They've looked at their past. They've done all the work they can do on sort of working out about themselves, and allows them to function in the present day sober in a moderately comfortable way. But for those people who haven't sort of worked out, being able to talk about what they're angry about, maybe, and often that's the case. I think people haven't been put in a place where they can access people who are prepared to listen to them, or they've never been asked the question. Maybe they've never been asked the question, why are you so angry? Why are you
Tell me
so
about
angry?
that. Yeah.
Why?
Because there's something so validating about that, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, if somebody says, well, I'm absolutely furious at the way I've been treated, and they won't do this and they won't do that. Okay, and you can sort of, well, let's try and talk about this, and actually just giving them the space to talk about it. But it is like anger is, when you're angry, you're pushing everybody away. Everybody runs away from anger. It's like a bomb going off. Everybody just spreads away, keeps away. Everybody, how many people do we know who, I think this is where it's probably with the people who listen to these podcasts, it's going to register most, is that they may have come from angry backgrounds, angry parents who, how I've got a lot of my clients who have come from dysfunctional, damaged childhoods, and they have spent their young years listening to angry parents shouting, and they've tried to either just sit there and listen to this anger going on in a slight state of fear and anxiety. Sometimes you'll hear really young children have tried to get in between the two parents, and that's a tragic situation to get into when you get anger. Is when you get little children of 6 or 7 sort of trying to keep parents apart. You're actually physically putting their arms up, trying to sort of keep somebody apart. And if that's been your experience of anger, well, I think it'll have had a very damaging effect on you. You see, I didn't come from that kind of background at all. As I said, it was like completely barren wasteland, emotional wasteland. But so for me to even get angry, I don't know, what are you talking about? But I do think there are a lot of people who've grown up around anger who are much quicker to access anger because it's been much more of a familiar experience for them. And I think as they got into their teens, they started getting angry back again. And it all becomes much more natural. Anger is much more natural to them. To me, anger is very, very unnatural. I don't like it at all. And I do like you, I find it very difficult to be around angry people.
But like I said, nobody finds it easy. I think that, what we've been covering today is like where that comes from, the roots of it, but also it's such a tool of manipulation of other people. Right? It's how it's used to manipulate other people because we want to pacify this person and we want to keep them like, we don't want that, we want to try and manage the anger because it scares us so much. It can be used, which is going back to how we started this conversation. It also, what goes hand in hand with anger is the control as well. It's used like the rageaholic, that constant using anger as a form of control, because it can control other people. And then what you were saying is like that lots of children grew up in those kind of households, and it will, I'm going to, not always the father, but often the father. Everybody was controlled. Like, I've had so many clients tell me that story, that they were all walking on eggshells. Like, he could be the nicest person, but they never knew when he was going to go off. And that the wife was always like on tenterhooks, ready to like try and manage it. And it controlled the whole family. It controlled like what they did, and not wanting to have people come over because there was like, just in case, and they were scared and it might make them. Yeah, it's really, it's such a big emotion.
I think you've only got to be really angry. I mean, sometimes when I hear clients talk about this, I'll often ask them to imagine themselves as a young child standing in the corner of the room. And I'll say, look, okay, look over there. There's some bookshelves over there. Imagine you're 6 or 7 years old. You're about 3 bookshelves high, 3 shelves high. You're not very big. Now imagine you and I, talking to the client, now imagine you and I shout at each other for an hour. How is that child standing over there going to feel? And of course they go, well, they're going to feel terrified. They're going to feel really frightened. And I go, okay, how often do you think how will they feel about this room? Well, they won't like this room at all, because they will have had an experience of just 1 hour of 2 people shouting at each other will be enough to make that child really frightened of that room, those 2 people. And I think you've only got to have about maybe not much more than that, really angry outbursts spread out over a certain period of time to develop a situation, as you say, where everybody's walking on eggshells. These people may not be angry all the time, but you've been angry enough times for me to be waiting for it to go off. Because it's a bit like when people get sober, they get sober for a certain period of time, everybody's waiting for them to drink again because they've not, when you've only got a few months sober. If you've been angry frequently or infrequently in a relationship or as a parent, that will impact the people around you to the point where they never relax. They don't ever relax, because you may not be angry. You may be sitting there reading the paper, but your people around you are not relaxed. They are making sure they don't say the wrong thing, making sure that you don't get triggered, making sure that everybody's very nice to them. And it's, nobody behaves naturally. They're just living in fear all the time of this bomb going off. That can be triggered by the slightest thing. It could just be making a little bit too much noise, or it can be such a controlling thing to be.
I found it interesting when I've listened to people, and I'm thinking of some men that I know who, because I think it's very hard to see this in yourself. I think anger feels very justified, right? It feels like my reaction here feels very justified, right? Anger, self-righteous anger. And I know I've heard more than a few men talk about, like, and some of it comes with maturity, but a lot of it comes from the work that they've done on themselves, about knowing that they were really angry and it really frightened and affected people. And they just couldn't really comprehend that. They just couldn't really comprehend what it was like to experience someone like them angry, and how they had frightened people, and not realize that. And now that they just don't. And it took a while for everybody to stop walking on eggshells. But there's a few men I can think of that I've heard that story where they're so gentle now. They're so like, they just, it's not. But I think what I realized is it's really hard to see this in yourself, because you just cannot quite comprehend the impact it's having on other people around you. It's the lacking of self-awareness. Anger, you just don't have the self-awareness. And
isn't it strange? In recovery communities, I very, very rarely come across angry people in recovery communities. It's not something that, whereas in real life, you walk out on the street, there's a lot of anger around. There's people getting angry in cars. There's people shouting out of car windows. There's people banging on, getting angry in shops and really getting agitated. You're beginning to see that a lot more nowadays, I think, as financial pressures take on. People don't know what to do. They don't know who to get angry at. And, they may not have enough money in the shop, and they'll just start screaming and shouting at the shopkeeper or whoever it is. And I think there's quite a lot of that around with people who are under social pressure of some kind or other. They don't know how, they're getting really scared. They're getting really pushed into a corner. They feel bullied by society, and they do get angry, and they get very few opportunities to take it out on people, and they often it is in shops and places like that where they come across other people that they can get really angry. I mean, actually, where do I see people most often angry? In a shop, actually, is the person where I most often see people really angry. It's when they're
Airports.
Airports, yeah, airports, true.
Right, because there's nothing like...
Yeah.
This flight's been cancelled.
Yeah,
I think airports is where you'll see the worst of humanity.
Yeah, you will,
which we all can. We all can. Like, we all can.
There's that... I mean, it's obviously a very sexist term, but called Karens in America, isn't it? Sort of, but it is but they're starting to show. I don't know what a male Karen is, but people are so angry, and I think there's
a lot of misogyny in that term.
There is a lot of misogyny in that term, but I think it's interesting that when you see rage like that, it just, to me, it shows a society where people are feeling lost. I mean, now I see it a lot in doctor surgeries, places like that, where people are frightened. They've got illness. They're not getting the care they think they need or deserve. They're not getting...
So it's all fear. It's all fear,
isn't it?
It's all fear. It's all fear.
Yeah. It's always...
And what's out of our control? It's about so there's a strong relationship here with fear, anger, control, and resentment as well, right? And it's like, I think there's so many things we cannot control, like back to the airport, like your flight's delayed, you got to get there, it's a wedding, your luggage hasn't turned up. Like there's so much fear and lack of control. Like anger feels like if I just show you enough how much this means to me, then you'll figure out a plane I can get on, right? It's kind of almost like that illogical, if I am just angry enough,
you'll
they
do
don't
it.
care in an
airport. It's probably the worst way to get what you want.
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Charm them to death. My husband's
charming. Yeah,
my husband is so charming and friendly.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm really upset about this situation, but if you can do anything to help me with that, that's going to get you further than going, you're not going to get very far like that at all. And I suppose you could extrapolate that little situation there out into the wider world. It's, why do people get angry? It's because I think usually it's because they're frightened.
Lack of control.
Yeah. I think, if you look at most angry men, they're very unhappy, very lonely.
Yes. Yeah.
Very, just not happy people at all. And I suppose that is the opposite of happiness, but maybe it is, but I don't know. But I do see in this, most people there's a lot of sort of macho posturing that goes on where people feel they've got to look angry and show anger and speak angrily in order to kind of get their point across. And it's not attractive to be around at all. It's horrible to be around. But the people who I see doing it, I very, very, very rarely see a woman do it in public. Men do it all the time, I think, especially behind the wheels of a car. But anger. But
I think that there's something about that women are not allowed to be angry.
Sure.
I also think that anger is the only emotion men are permitted. Men are not permitted to be sad.
True.
I think anger is permitted in men, and I don't think it's permitted so much in women. It's not feminine. It's not right. But I think, and I think that that's one of the differences that you see a lot of male anger, because it is allowed. Like you won't be you can't be sad. You can't be all of the other emotions that maybe would be feminized. I do think that there is something about that, and I think that's why
I think you're absolutely right. I cry a lot. I'm quite sentimental,
Me too,
emotional.
I cry all the time, so.
And I'm not ashamed of it. I don't mind the fact that I cry a lot. I don't mind that at all. I think I'd much rather come away from an encounter having cried than having got really angry. I mean, it isolates you when you're angry. I mean, how many times in my life when I have been angry, I've suddenly found myself on my own, sitting in a car, stewing with rage about a situation, and just been impotent about it. Not being able to...
isolates you. You're right. Anger
it does.
Isolates you. Whereas crying about something, I'd be like, oh shit.
Yeah, exactly. It elicits empathy, doesn't it? And support. But anger, you're on your own with that, pal. You're not going to get any support or help for that. And I think people are getting angrier and angrier. I think as the world gets on a more slightly bigger scale, I think people's worlds are getting more difficult. And as I said, in this country, certainly, if you look at the way that the services are being run for people, people get very frightened and they get very angry because they don't think they're going to get the care they deserve. And it's a difficult one.
Interesting topics. I'd love to know your thoughts on this, on dealing and experience with anger, and any suggestions that you guys have for any topics that you'd like us to talk about in the future. All right, everybody. Thanks so much, Chip.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening.
I dreamt that you were twisting through 7 suns of gold, and the gypsy was insisting that its story must be told.